Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining Physical Acoustics webinar today. My name is Shahram Tahezadeh from the Open University in UK, and it's my privilege to introduce today's speakers. First, I welcome Dr. Gioia Fusaro. She's a postdoc research fellow at University of Bologna, and as well as being an acoustician, she's a chartered architect as well as a building engineer. So that's three careers in one. Our second speaker or joint speaker is Matteo Cingolani, who is a PhD student at the same university, and they will be talking about effectively applications of metamaterials in industry and practical issues with that. Before moving on, I apologize that my camera doesn't work, so you're spared of seeing my face. So without further ado, I'll hand the virtual microphone to our speakers, and you can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Sham. Thank you very much. And welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. As we have been introduced again, today we are going to talk about different issues that can be raised while designing industrial application based on metamaterials. And today I am with my colleague Matteo Cingolani, and we are from Group Research in Bologna, which faces different topics of research, specifically physical acoustics, building acoustics, room acoustics, and instrumental acoustics. At the moment, we have a quite packed group, and we are working on a number of projects, such as, for example, metamaterials. So in this presentation of today, we're going to talk to you about our experience with different impact of metamaterials, of thermohygrometric or additive manufacturing facilities and different techniques or different conditions. And on the second part of the presentation, we're going to face a more focused research on the user perception impact of acoustic metamaterial-based products, facing, for example, different psychoacoustics parameters and soundscape descriptors in order to outline as much complete industrial approach for metamaterial-based design. So without further ado, I leave the floor to Matteo, which is going to introduce you the first part.
Thank you, Gioia. And good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. Everybody knows that the acoustic metamaterials absorption performance depends on the geometrical parameters and not on the constitutive material. And the Helmholtz resonator-based metamaterials have a very narrow absorption bandwidth. And for this reason, they should need a fine-tuning for real application in real life. So we wonder two questions: how thermohygrometric condition may affect the sound absorption, and how manufacturing processes may affect the sound absorption performance. So for these two questions, we focused on our case study that was the coiled up resonator that is made up of a spiral tube embedded in a rigid circular disc and covered by a front panel and a back panel. And the acoustic properties of the coiled up resonator depends on the geometrical parameters that are the length of the inner spiral, the size of the perforation, that in our case is square, the radius of the sample, and the porosity of the front panel. That is the ratio between the opening area and the total area of the sample. The first step was to prototype, quickly prototype a sample of coiled up resonator with the following geometrical parameters. So the length of the spiral, the side, and the diameter of the sample. And we 3D printed the sample to measure in the impedance tube according to the ISO. And after that, we try to calibrate the experimental measurement with the analytical model and the numerical model developed on COMSOL multiphysics. And in this figure, we can show the comparison of the analytical, numerical, and experimental measurements. We define 3 parameters for our study that are to take in consideration for our study, that are the max amplitude of the sound absorption, the frequency of the resonance, and the inverse of quality factor. And we investigate the thermohygrometric variation on the sample. So first of all, we fix a temperature of 20 degrees, and we change the relative humidity from 20% to 80%. And we measure the sample with this hygrometric condition in the impedance tube. And we found out that the relative humidity variation turned out to be neglectable, because it doesn't change the frequency and the amplitude of the resonant peaks. On the other side, we fix the relative humidity at 50%, and we try to make measurement with different temperature from 10 degrees to 50 degrees with a delta T of 10 degrees. And in this case, we found out that the temperature variation turned out to be relevant. So we focus on the temperature variation, and we study the delta F, the delta frequency, for each peaks of the resonant resonator. Sorry. So in the first peak, there is a delta F of 36 Hz from 10 to 15. The second peaks show delta F for 64 Hz. The third peaks show delta F of 122 Hz. And for the 4 peaks, there was a delta F of 156 degrees. So what does it mean? It means that Eiger is the temperature, Eiger is the resonant frequency, and the reason why the Eiger is the resonant frequency is that there is a thermal expansion that shortens the length of the spiral and increase the frequency of each resonating peaks. At the end of the study, we try to compare the regression curve coming from the experimental data of the impedance tube of the experimental campaign with the Clash-Rinkevitz model, that is a model that defined the behavior of polyethylene in terms of thermal expansion. So both follow an exponential trend. So we did the same for other 2 kinds of acoustic metamaterial, the double-coiled Helmholtz resonator and the neck-embedded Helmholtz resonator. So the method was the same we used for the coiled-up resonator, and we find out that there is a delta F for both of them, and the trend that the exponential data follow is always an exponential trend that could be compared with the Clash-Rinkevitz model. After that, we focus on the 3D printed methods, so how manufacturing processes could affect the acoustic performance of the coiled-up resonator. We study 3 different printing processes. There are the fused deposition modeling, FDM, the stereolithography, SLA, and the selective laser melting, SLM. The FDM is a very affordable process, and the main advantage is that could be used sustainable and durable materials like PAT or PLA. The stereolithography is more expensive process and need a recommended DPI and a qualified operator. And the selective laser melting is expensive as well, more expensive than the FDM, allow a design freedom, but at the same time require mandatory DPI and a qualified operator. So our case study was focused on 3 different printing technology and 4 different samples. So in particular, we can see in the picture a PLA sample made by a fused deposition modeling technique, a polyethylene sample made by a fused deposition modeling, a resin sample made by SLA technique, and a steel sample made by a SLM technique, in order to compare the variety of the parameters involved in different manufacturing processes. The results of the first experimental campaign show that there are many differences in terms of sound absorption coefficient. In particular, we can see that the resin sample and the polyethylene sample match in a better way the analytical model of the Calibration resonator. The other one, the SLM sample and the PLA sample doesn't match the provisional model. So we wonder which were the potential manufacturing parameters to be considered to study their influence on the quality of the acoustic metamaterials. And we found out the roughness of the inner walls of the coiled up resonator. The infield density of the samples, and the printing quality and speed parameters. So the first step was to study the roughness of the inner spiral. We use a roughness tester to measure all the sample, and we found out that the best sample in terms of sound absorption coefficient was the polyethylene and the resin, but they shown different values of roughness. In particular, the polyethylene showed a very high values of roughness, and the resin one show a very low value of roughness. This means that the roughness does not affect sound absorption performance. I mean, for the coiled up resonator. On the other side, we study the infield. To study the infield density, we set up a configuration for the polyethylene sample, and we 3D printed 5 different samples with different infield density, and we found out that from a infield density of 30% onward, we have a good matching with the provisional model. And below this value of 30%, the experimental measurements show that there is no matching with the provisional model. So it means that the infield density affects the sound absorption of the coiled up resonator. The last parameters, the last part of the work was studying the different printing speed and printing quality of the 3D printer. So we defined 2 different settings of printing speed that we call the slow one and the fast one, and 2 different settings of printing quality. So we call the fine one and the coarse one. So in total, we could do 4 different combination of printing, and we 3D printed 4 different samples. For same sample with printed with different parameters of printing. And as shown in this figure, we can see that only just one configuration match the provisional model, that is the slow fine. So the sample printed with a layer height of 0.12 millimeters and a slow setting of printing speed. So the base speed was 50. The travel speed was 70 millimeters per second, and the top and bottom layer was 4 millimeters. Focusing on these 4 samples, we can see in this picture the picture coming from an analysis where we made through the scanning electron microscope. In particular, we can see the difference between the fast printing speed and the slow printing speed in the picture A and B. The picture A shown the ondulatory layer that are coming from the fast printing setup. Otherwise, the slow printing speed doesn't show this strange ondulatory behavior of the layers. And after that, we analyze the layers in picture C and D of the coarse printing quality and the fine printing quality. And we can see that the coarse printing quality, you can see bigger pore between the layer. And in the fine printing quality, you can see pore that are smaller and does not affect the sound performance of the resonators. So the remarks of the study is that the temperature variation turned out to be relevant on the acoustical performances of acoustic metamaterial, in particular on the coiled-up resonator. And the relationship between the temperature and the frequency of the resonator, the resonance peaks, follow an exponential trend that is similar to the polyethylene raising thermal expansion trend. The FDM, the fused deposition modeling, and the PET represent the method and the material more easy, cheap, and accurate to develop acoustic metamaterial prototypes. And this approach that we use for the coiled-up resonator could be applied for prototype other kind of acoustic metamaterial geometry, taking into account the printing speed, the printing quality setups. And I leave the space to Gioia, my colleague, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Matteo, for introducing this first part of the study. And at the moment, also, we have seen different effects in terms of real case applications, meaning variation of both thermohygrometric effects. And then we have seen how different setup of 3D printing impact the attended results from numerical models up to real measured values of sound absorption. So right now we're going to focus on why we are going to further develop metamaterials for different function and application. In this case, we are looking into building applications, so building components or parts, and we do this thanks to the fact, again, that metamaterials' physical properties do not belong to the constitutive material. So we can characterize them in order to optimize the final shape, in order to function, for example, thermoregulation functions or noise propagation, insulation, or ventilation. And for these specific tasks, at the moment, we are going to see a case study, which is represented by the acoustic metamaterial-based ventilated window. So first of all, we are all familiar with different outdoor acoustic inputs, and this is something that everybody can relate to compared to different indoor comfort scenario. These are definitely two opposite sides from when we consider outdoor and indoor inputs. And we are going to analyze how we can filter or we can optimize the first one in order to have optimal indoor comfort towards the second part. At the same time, we all know that there are already existence methods that can achieve and can solve this problem. For example, activating active noise control or through mechanical ventilation. However, at the same time, we have to face the environmental issues that we are going through and we will go through the next years and next decades. And for this reason, regulatory governations are going to ask and going to suggest us to develop as passive as possible systems in order to make the new technology also as sustainable and environmentally friendly as possible. And from this motivation, it came out the idea of acoustic metamaterial-based window, which I started in Sheffield and Singapore, and now I'm continuing here in Bologna with the industrial engineering group. Again, for window design, we already had some attempts at solving this problem, allowing natural ventilation and noise insulation at the same time. However, most of these attempts ended up in a quite bulky solution, limiting the design from the designer and architect or engineer point of view. On the other side, in the last decades, metamaterials have paved their way for improving engineered systems in order to be optimized from a constitutive material point of view and from multi-physical function point of view. However, there is still a lack in terms of ergonomic study and ergonomic guideline that can help researchers or engineers to design metamaterial-based products toward a more ergonomic and user-centered approach. For example, this first example comes from my PhD research, and here we try to focus the metamaterial technology toward the outer part of this system in order to leave the central part to function as a visual connection, so it's a transparent panel, and then use the lateral part for noise regulation and ventilation. And as we can see, this is a quite basic acoustic metamaterial approach using an acoustic black hole system or three-quarter wavelength resonator system applied in a three-dimensional configuration. In this way, you can see that the airflow through the system, while the incident noise wave is partly reduced by the resonating flanks and volumes that are facing the ducts where the noise passes through. Since this research was a mix of both material research and also social science research, we have applied different, after designing and defining an optimal unit cell, we have developed it in order to have an acoustic metamaterial to solve this problem that I just mentioned. And then we have tried to adapt it in a most ergonomic way as possible through both questionnaire and participatory design methods. In this way, we managed to reach a design that could allow both the physical function in a way and in an ergonomic way that could be used and could be usable by the final user as well. For example, again, this metamaterial-based window is applied on the outer wall of the building, dividing the outdoor condition from the indoor condition, and is characterized by two parameters that were significant from the participatory design research, which were the height of the frame of the window, and then different openings in order to allow gradually more or less ventilation flow. This is a very brief configuration of how the model was done in a numerical study through COMSOL Multiphysics. And again, this numerical part was used for optimizing the design of the model through different geometric parameters. Moreover, we need to consider that there was a configuration optimization going from this first one where the acoustic metamaterial unit cell is presented in this way, so with panels inclined of angle alpha with different flanks that produce cavities, resonant cavities facing the ducts where both airflow and acoustic wave propagates through. So, but we wanted to optimize it also from the space, exploiting as much as possible all the volume included in the system of the window. And so for to do this, we have perforated the panels facing the cavities and the duct, allowing us to have a higher volume of resonance. And for the sake of industrial design strategies, so also for different manufacturing approaches and manufacturing strategies, we had decided to try and test two different configurations of perforated panels. The first one that you see here, called configuration A, has both perforated panels facing one duct, meaning that we have two different unit cells to be produced. One is with the panels perforated, and one is with the panel not perforated. While in the configuration C that we have tested, we can see that the acoustic metamaterial unit cell is just one, reducing the effort on additive manufacturing, on the manufacturing process for industrial purposes. And this was again tested for the sake of understanding if we could optimize the design for the later parts of manufacturing. Here again, you have the two parameters that were investigated with a parametric sweep in order to understand the different properties of this CO2 configuration. And the variation was specifically related for the height of the frame. It was from 10 to 5 centimeters, while from the opening of the window, it was from 13 up to 3 centimeters. So we're going to go through very briefly to the results, and we can see from the results that what we wanted to achieve, the red one, the red graph represents the previous configuration. We can see that with the optimization, we arise to a lower frequency transmission loss, and we managed to also find out that different ventilation degree, so different opening degree, which are represented from all these graphs, are allowed with the same transmission loss and noise impact of the window, meaning that it doesn't mean how much do I open the window, the noise insulation effect will still be on place. At the same time, we have tried to understand the properties in terms of air change rate, and thanks to different ISO and different governmental guidelines, we managed to reach quantify the air change, which can be compared at the moment. So we haven't implemented the ventilation part yet, but we are doing it now. But so far, the results are quite like to the results compared to residential and light commercial, such as offices and business offices requirements. On the final part, we have studied a previous model of the metamaterial window, so the not optimized one, from a different user perception point of view, considering psychoacoustic parameters, where psychoacoustic is science of sound perception, which investigates acoustic stimuli and hearing sensation through statistical relationship. And in this case, we have evaluated 4 parameters, which is loudness, roughness, and fluctuation strength. At the same time, we tried to attempt at a soundscape descriptor investigation as well. Soundscape was first introduced by Murray Schafer, and it is the acoustic environment as perceived or experienced and or understood by a person or people in context. And so, as we can see, regulatory systems are already considering soundscape for future development of our society and our cities. We have considered quite different descriptors from soundscape, which are those that you can see here, going from pleasant, chaotic, vibrant, and uneventful, up to a calm, annoying, eventful, and monotonous descriptor. And we have asked people, we have recorded this filtering effect of the window, of non-optimized window, on different recordings from environmental recordings. And then we have asked users to judge them according to different soundscape descriptors. So what we have achieved here, this is the first analysis comparing acoustic meta-window unit amplitude filter, considering the recording with and without the effect of the acoustic metamaterial based window. And we can see that there is a sort of reduction filter going from 300 up to 5,000 Hertz, significantly affecting most of the recording, going from, for example, a beach recording environment to a woodland to a busy street. This can be reflected also from the soundscape descriptor questionnaire, where we can see that with the window, the effect of the recording that the users is hearing is represented as more monotonous, more calm, or less chaotic. So I would like to end this presentation just briefly taking all the bits that we have analyzed so far, from Matteo's presentation to my presentation. So what we are trying to do now is not something that is finished yet, but we are trying to work in it together also with other research groups in Europe and also abroad. What we start from is generally an analytical investigating method, which is used for reproduction and combination of already existent metamaterial for sound and thermal control. The next step is the numerical analysis, which is basically used for optimizing specific geometrical parameters for a targeted frequency or ventilation performance. After that, we have, of course, a validation of this model through experimental measurements. And finally, one of the most of the high clue and the most important part, which we are approaching right now, is the ergonomic and human perception assessment. So through social science study applied for industrial design, we try to achieve as much as possible information on how the final user will feel more comfortable in using one product based on metamaterials and on different relationship that the users connects himself or herself with the product itself. However, what we are trying to aim at this stage is to define different suitabilities for metamaterials and suitability techniques for specific environmental condition and different ergonomic function. Thank you so much again for listening, and thank you for inviting us to present today. I would like to remind you that we still have a call open for Forum Acousticum Summer School. It's on a metamaterial, but you can find also other very interesting topics. I think that the call is going to close the 31st of July. So in case you haven't checked it out yet, please go on the link or look for Forum Acousticum Summer School, and there you can find a lot of topics, between which there is also acoustic metamaterials, which we are going to share this year. So thank you again for your attention, and in case you have any question, Matteo and I are very happy to answer them.
Well, thank you very much, Gioia and Matteo, for a very interesting talk. Covering from science to psychoacoustics and industrial applicability. Now I invite audience, if they have any questions, please raise your hand so that I can unmute you, or we can unmute you to ask your question. If no one is
I have a question.
Please, Anton, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Really nice one. Just I suppose a quick question. You mentioned that metamaterials only take into account essentially geometry, so you exclude the effect of the material. And in your experiments of that coiled resonator, you actually see the effect of the materials, as far as I understand, when you change the temperature.
Yes.
So can you actually include the effect of the material into your design to enhance its performance?
Okay.
Or it's something which you, I don't know, avoid for the sake of analytical model?
We haven't worked on the analytical optimization of this effect, but yes, the final remarks is that it's an ideal behavior that depends on the geometrical parameters, but we should try with other kind of material. It should be interest to go outside the polymer world, making some stuff with wood, on metal, stuff like that. But we haven't worked on that analytically yet.
Yeah, and as you were saying, Anton, it is most likely to leave the material, like the 3D printing, prototyping procedure, to an approximation, like a post-processing one, rather than including it in the numerical model, for the sake of leaving the numerical model as light as possible for the calculation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Olga?
I have a question about basically the same topic, the same feature of your metamaterials behavior. Have you considered the not just the thermal expansion of your material, but also the variations of speed of sound with temperature?
Yes, but we consider the variation of the speed inside the material, because we use to make the sample hotter, so we taken into account that the air inside the spiral is hotter than the normal. But I think that this change is it's not the most important effect, but it's more than the thermal expansion of the polymer, of the polyethylene, instead of the changing of the speed of the air inside the spiral.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Anyone who wants to ask question, they can use Q&A chat or raise your hands and we will unmute you or to ask question.
If there are no further questions, I thank our speakers again for a very interesting talk, and as also considering practical applications and engineering applications of metamaterials, and that we've all worked on.